What up, everyone? It's Deeg. I want to talk to y'all a little bit today about my experience playing New World. So, for those who don't know, New World is uh, has been branded as an MMORPG. It's being developed by Amazon Game Studios, and that carries with it a lot of weight. Um, it was originally going to come out earlier this year. However, a few months back, we heard an announcement that it was being pulled back, delayed for another full year until 2021. However, the devs did come through in some way and let a lot of people, myself included, get their hands on it early. So at the end of August and the beginning of September, I spent about a week playing New World. Admittedly, I did not get close to the end game, but while playing it, I got what I felt's a pretty good sense of what it's trying to do. And what I wanted to do was share my thoughts with you and just talk a little bit about how to think about New World going into next year, what we can expect from it, what some of the pitfalls that lie ahead for it might be, and why I'm actually excited about it, because I am. So, okay, first off, what's good? New World, in many ways, to me, feels a lot like a light survival action RPG. So rather than the traditional MMO tab targeting, or even like a light tab targeting system that you have in a game like I say, a Guild Wars, everything in New World is skill shot, and I think that's very, very cool. So I've played my share of MMOs, but for me, I came to MMOs by way of actually playing shooters. I played shooters around the turn of the century. God, that makes me sound old. The turn of the century. And then in the early 2000s, a game called PlanetSide came out, and it was a shooter in an MMO context with hundreds and hundreds of players, bases, continents, vehicles, the works. And then after that, I got into World of Warcraft, which is my first proper MMO that I played. But I like skill shot combat. You can see it right here on the screen as I'm getting wrecked by those couple of skeletons. Here, I'm actually leveling up my rifle and hammer skills. Two skills that were firmly outside the meta during the beta, but that I wanted to play around with because I thought they were just fun. I mean, look at this hammer. It's completely ridiculous. It's I think technically called the Siege Hammer, which perhaps paints a picture of how it's best used. Here you can see my failure, and I've died, and I have some spawning options. So those options are going to be, number one, the nearest settlement, and number two, my campfire. There's the third one, but I'm not sure what that was. A campfire is a crafted object that you place on the ground. There are certain lockouts where you can't place things, like very close to landmarks, where if you die, you come back. And I think that this primarily exists for PvP, because New World is supposed to be, or at least it was supposed to be, a PvP-centric game. I never had a chance to play it during the alpha, and all the people who did were under NDA for having done so, but every indication I've been able to, let's say, absorb through the ether, has pointed to the fact that this went from being a vision of a very PvP-centered sandbox experience to being softened to be something that can be more digestible by a broader audience. And what that means is PvP has become optional, and PvE content has been brought forward, or at least they tried. So something you'll notice if you actually get your hands on New World, although there's no saying what it's going to look like the next time it actually comes out, but when I played it, you start off at the shoreline of the New World. You've shipwrecked as a sailor, right? And you have to make your way inland and find people, and you just, make your way in the world as a brand new MMO level 1 nobody. And there's some early exposition. You have this kind of boss fight that instructs you how to play the game. You get killed because you actually can't beat the guy, and you wake up wherever you're supposed to go next. But then after that, although there are quests that kind of lead you around by the nose and guide you through the world, there's very little story presentation. And I'm not a snob about story presentation. I don't need it to be big cutscenes. I don't need it to be any specific way. I'm comfortable with games that want to throw walls of text at me. I'm also comfortable with games that really want to just treat me like I can't read and play movies in between gameplay. Depending on how it's done, that can totally work. What New World does is it gives you this admittedly beautiful world and a bunch of NPCs in towns that have, number one, no spoken dialogue. You're not actually talking to them. They're more like vending machines, and they have these little walls of text, paragraphs of text whenever they give you a quest, but nothing seems to be really connected up. There's no broader narrative, and the writing in those quests is not, even for someone who likes reading quest text, I found it to be quite boring. And I'm the kind of guy who's going to read every single word in, like, say, a World of Warcraft text. So to give you an idea, that's just how undercooked it is. So when I was leveling up and playing through the game, what stood out to me? Number one, the weapons feel really great. And we knew from the start that not all the weapons that are in New World were going to be in this beta test. So there's a few that they're not here. Some of the ones I really liked, and you're not going to see them all here, but I really enjoyed the sword and shield. It has a very dynamic play style and it's very strong in PvP because it has some, you can like block, you can shield bash, you can shield rush, and also has some good burst capability. Where if you can sneak up on an enemy, you can get a huge like backstab damage, and it's just really fun. The hammer stood out to me as a very fun weapon, although I'll admit I didn't find a great way to use it. The bow. Both of the ranged weapons in this game feel really good, which for a game based on skill shots, I wasn't really sure if it was going to pull off. And to answer a question, yeah, you can miss. There's probably some kind of auto-aim going in here. I don't think this is full bullet physics. This isn't like a shooter. But the aimed mechanics are, at least for someone who played about 25 hours, they passed the test for me. They were good enough. Here you see a mob doing something that they all do. They have these things called grit attacks. Grit attacks are basically power moves. And when an enemy that does a grit attack, it's very hard to interrupt it. Whereas when it's doing a normal attack, if you just poke it, you'll interrupt his attack and be able to jump in. It's meant to be what I understand to be Souls-like combat, where there's some back and forth. And you can see me. It's mostly back, not a lot of forth in this particular section. Admittedly, I'm a bit underpowered because I'm trying to level up some weapons that I haven't, at this point, played very much. So I'm being a little bit risky with my gameplay, but I said, fuck it, let's just try it. Here's the inventory. I'm going to pause this for a second. And you can see that although there is some room for, proper RPG itemization, it doesn't feel like a super duper loot heavy game to me. So let's see, on the left side, you've got your basic armor pieces, your helmet, your chest piece, which is not just your chest, but like your whole, like, kind of, it's the main component of your visual presentation, let's put it that way. Gloves, legs, and boots. There's also a slot for a ring and a satchel, which is like a backpack that increases your storage kit capacity. Two that I didn't unlock, which I think is like amulet and I'm not sure what the other one is, and two more at higher levels. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 total gear slots. Plus you have several weapons that you can equip at once. And that goes up the higher level you get. You can see I never made it to level 30, so I never got to have 3 weapons at once. One weapon here that I don't have equipped, which was very prevalent in the beta, is the life staff. The life staff is the game's healing staff. So similar to a game like a Skyrim, let's say. New World doesn't make you pick a class when you start the game. Rather, it lets you start using weapons and leveling them up. And unlocking weapon perks as you go. So there's also another way, another mechanic as you level up where you actually pick like strength or dexterity or intelligence, classic RPG traits for your character. So you can't necessarily like if you can't go from being the best DPS player to the best healer on the same character, but you can level up a life staff all the way up to the highest level and have it be a pretty useful thing, and also be a very strong melee player, for example. But what people were using the life staff in this wasn't for a high level ability; it was for a low level ability that lets you dash. And the dash is very important, not because, although it is useful in combat, although although that is the case, I would say that the life staff got used primarily outside of combat because it is the only way to improve mobility within the game. There's no mounts, there's no flight paths. You spend a lot of time on foot in this game, so everyone used a life staff for mobility. That's a quality of life problem that I think that needs to be looked at. I don't necessarily believe that not having mounts is a bad thing. And I think that certainly there are risks to that with a game that's meant to be PvP focused. But it does feel weird to have just one weapon with a mobility skill, and for it to be a healing weapon. I'm not sure what needs to be done there, but it did feel kind of weird having essentially to devote one slot whenever I was playing seriously to that skill. Anyway, I digress. I don't know what to do with that. It's just a weird dynamic that I'll be interested to see how it gets addressed next time the game is playable. So some quick slots. You can slot essentially potions and consumable items here. These are key bindable. It's all very slick. The whole UI feels very good. It's funny because I don't think it actually pops that much when you watch it on stream, but when you're actually playing in it, like the animations are all high frame rate. There's very crisp UI sounds that come with it. It feels good to actually use. And when you're in your inventory, you can see my character is actually crouched down. You actually crouch down in the world. So in that way, it feels a little bit more like RP survivalish, and it does a lot of things to slow down what might otherwise look like modern MMO gameplay. So here we have up top ammo and shield. So that's pretty straightforward. Ammo is arrows for the bow and bullets for the gun, and shield, which is relevant only if you're using a sword. No other weapons, even the other one-handed ones like the hatchet in this version of the beta, used a shield, although I think we can infer by the fact that the shield is not necessarily linked to the sword that there will be other weapon combinations upcoming that will use it. Like, I think I've heard of pistol shield being a thing, and there were some enemies in the beta that had pistol shield, so that's pretty cool. On the right side, you can see a very modern-looking inventory search and inventory setup. There's the carrying capacity in the top right. Carrying capacity, I think, has an impact on your ability to dodge, but I'm not positive. So that's neat. There's also an armor weight system in the game, light, medium, heavy. And the heavier your armor setup is, the more different your dodge becomes. So people who are really interested in like one-on-one PvP dueling in New World, what they'll do is they'll actually play in light armor, even though it's less strong, because if you're wearing light armor, you get the best dodge. You get the roll dodge. It takes you a long distance. Whereas if you're playing in, let's say, heavy armor, you get more of like a sidestep dodge, which goes less of a distance and is less powerful for evasion. So there's that. The one last thing I'll point at here on the top right is the tools section. So you have 4 different gathering tools equipped for 4 different gathering scenarios. They're not mutually exclusive. Everyone can do all of them. And you can see there are different qualities to it. So there's a knife for skinning animals that you've killed. There's a sickle for gathering like plants and bushes. A pickaxe for mining rock and an ore, and an axe for getting wood from trees. And all these go into a crafting system that I'm not going to talk much about because I didn't get to explore it much. But it seems to be New World's intent, I believe, is to allow crafting to compete with other ways of attaining valuable gear. Of course, I think that's something that almost every game that has crafting says, and they don't all do. So we'll see what actually happens there. But there's a heavily RNG mechanic in crafting. It's not like other games where you get a recipe for X and you craft X. When you have a recipe for something in New World, what'll happen is you have the basic recipe, and then you can add stuff. You can like add more materials here, add more materials there, add a special thing here. And if you do that, it increases your percent chance to get certain beneficial effects. So if you want the best steel sword, you don't get the recipe for the best steel sword. You get the recipe for the steel sword, you add the extra you add the extra materials you want to give yourself an edge on getting what you want out of it. And then you make 50 of them and you take the best one. So that's how that seems to work. Anyway, let's continue the gameplay and we'll continue talking about what I like about it. What am I actually doing here? Okay. So I've just died a bunch of times to these skeletons, and I'm going back at it. If you look at the right side, you'll see a quest tracker. And the one that I'm trying to do here is actually not appearing there. But what I'm trying to do is essentially get up this tower to get this box. And this, the boxes are right now a big part of New World PvE. Every single quest you get is either go to X, kill X, or pick up boxes at X place. That's it. That's all there is. No variation. And these mobs just happen to be in my way, and I happen to be under-leveled for them, so it's a little bit of a push. I do eventually get there, but we'll see if I finish talking before that happens. And that's kind of rolls up to the general feeling of New World in 2020 is it's very clearly a PvP game that put on the brakes to open it up to a more broad PvE community. And there's two questions there in my mind. Number one, is it going to be able to pull that off? And number two, should it even try? So this is my fear for New World. My fear for New World is that in trying to create a game that more people will like, it'll fall into the trap that I've seen so many other games like this fall into, which is becoming a game for nobody. I made a long video a long time ago about Guild Wars 2 talking about how, complaining really, about how by constantly softening the game mechanics and lowering friction and making it easier and easier to get to everything all the time, rather than making a game that was good, they made a game that anyone could beat and made it meaningless as a result. That's my fear for New World. Currently, it has some like Apex-ish kind of activities. There is a boss at the end of the beta. A few people got there, but it's very obviously a stub of the idea of a boss fight. Like, it has no real boss mechanics. There's no telegraphs. There's no like effects. It's just a big enemy that you fight in like a very like red dark area. Ooh, scary, right? In terms of PvP, there's a little more going on. So the way that you'll experience PvP early in this game is PvP missions. PvP missions are things you can take from your faction leader. Okay, what's a faction? A faction in New World is one of 3 factions that you will pick at level 10. And, you know, this might be different later, but, you know, this is what it was like in the beta. And these are either the Covenant, the Syndicate, or I can't think of the third one. The big tough guys. These guys are purple, so they're Syndicate. I'm yellow, I'm Covenant. But we can't actually shoot each other because none of us are PvP flagged. This is one of the ways the game changed from alpha to beta. And it makes very weird feeling interactions. So I also think that early in the game, in the alpha, that there were no factions. And I believe the factions were introduced as a way to essentially make PvP combat a bit more likely to be fair. Because I believe in the original iterations, it was just like open season. And you could join a company and ally yourself with like a guild or a company or a clan, whatever you want to call it, that exists in this game. But beyond that, it was like you against everyone. So now it's you and your company's faction against the other two factions. And all the zones in this game all have faction ownership. So there's a main city in each territory, and it's possible to gain control of that for a company to gain control of that city. And when that happens, that company's faction then owns the region, and your faction gets certain bonuses while you're in the region. Things like faster gathering, better XP gain, stuff like that. And if you're a crafter, if you're in the city of a town that your faction or your company owns, then you get some bonuses too, like better RNG on your stuff. So you can see like there is some good bonuses to having those territories captured. So that's like the beginning of a good feeling PvP sandbox. Like there's PvP, there's rewards for it, there's incentive to actually engage with it, but the way you engage with it in this version of the game is not very good. So I was mentioning a moment ago PvP missions. PvP missions, they're kind of dumb. Like I said, you get them from your faction leader, and your mission will be to essentially go into an area that is controlled by the other faction and do something. And usually it's a PvE objective, where you're going to pick up boxes or kill enemies, or the most interesting one, patrol, where you just have to exist in an area while a timer ticks down. And when the timer's done ticking, you've completed the mission. You do have to return safely in order to do so, and if you die at any point along the way, all of your PvP missions will fail. So there is some downside to it. But why do a PvP mission? Well, when you're PvP flagged, you get like a 10% XP bonus. I'm sure you can imagine that a 10% XP bonus is nowhere near enough of an incentive to get people risk being ganked by the other faction. There's probably something else there too, but it did not strike me as enough. And as a result, for the last few days of this beta test, I found myself walking around the world using the in-game voice chat, which, by the way, I love. Thank you, Amazon. Please don't take away our in-game voice. There's general proximity voice in the game, and anyone around you at all factions can hear you. It's great. So I was just walking around talking to people, be like, man, why don't you PvP? Fight me. I couldn't find anyone to fight me like the whole last 3 play sessions I had. And it's because people were doing what they do with these games. They're trying to win. And in trying to win, you optimize those kind of interactions out, because PvPing is not efficient. And that's a big fucking problem for a game like New World. Big fucking problem. There are wars. Okay, what are wars? Wars are scheduled, instanced, faction versus faction war fights over cities. It's what makes cities change ownership between the factions. I saw some footage from these wars. I didn't get a chance to play in any of them myself. They seem okay. Like, if you think of like any MMO that has like a command point based, let's call it battleground, it's kind of like that systematically. You there are 3 points in the field. The attacking faction has to capture them, which means literally just stand on them until a timer ticks down. And then once they've done that, for some reason, those command points unlock the ability to breach the gates of the city. And there's some win condition. I'm not sure what it is. It's probably based on standing on, a blue or red field until a timer ticks down. And the wars, they looked kind of fun, but I will say that war mode itself did seem a bit, again, like most things in the game, undercooked. And that's where I'm at with New World. The bottom-up mechanics, what you see me doing here right now, feel pretty good. A lot of people complain about the way the weapons work, that 3 specials abilities per weapon with weapon ability lockouts, which I don't really care to explain. You can look it up. But when you use a skill on a weapon, the skill in that same position on your other weapons gets locked out until the original skill cools down. People complain about that because in MMO you have a lot of buttons to press, and in this game you might not have as many buttons to press, but I think that's okay. If you left click, you just auto attack. If you shift and left click, you strong attack. Like, you shouldn't be using an ability every single time that you swing your weapon, and that's okay. It really is okay. Again, slow it down. The world itself looks and feels great. You can see it. This is in the Everfall region, near the center of the playable territory for the beta. The gathering seems okay. The crafting seems interesting. When you actually get to fight people, it's actually kind of fun. Although there are some issues with friendly occlusion. So there's no friendly fire in the game. But there is body blocking. And the body blocking doesn't just apply to people, it applies to projectiles. So if you're an archer or a rifleman and you're trying to hit a target that's being surrounded by a bunch of your bros hacking away with a hatchet, you're not going to hit him. You're going to hit your bros back, and he's not going to take any damage, but your bolt's not going to do any work. And for that reason... Okay, so let me say one more thing about the body blocking. Although that is annoying in that scenario, I think it's okay for that to be annoying. But there has to be an upside, and there is. Body blocking means that the way you position yourself actually kind of matters in the world. Let's see if this guy ganks me or if I gank him. Oh, I ate a potion. Looks like I'm going to get him. Close, though. So the body blocking makes positioning actually matter, which is cool. That's part of what makes the combat system feel as good as it is. Without that, it's not really a very skill shot based system. It's not very Souls-like, right? So I'm okay with body blocking, and I'm okay with the fact that you can't kill your friends, and I'm also okay with the fact that if you have a bunch of hatchet bros, you're not going to shoot through them to get to your target. Which leads me to my next conclusion, which is that the combat in this game doesn't feel good at scale. It doesn't feel great right now when there are a lot of people involved. And for that reason, I really hope New World finds a way to channel combat interactions to be smaller in scale. Like up to 5 versus 5, something like that. And I don't really know how you do that. Because I also like the open aspect of the game, where you're not in an instance when you play. And I would really like if they would find a way to take those wars and remove the instance limitation, because it feels really weird. And is one of the things that, to me, is not quite in line with the general theming of the game. It doesn't feel like you're in a big sandbox when you get pulled out into some kind of artificial arena that the rest of the world can't interact with. So that's probably all about all I have to say about the game itself. I just like it. The combat feels good. The world feels good. The UI is crisp. It's fun talking to people, bullshitting, taunting each other. I would like to see a lot more of all that stuff. But the goals and the activities that you shoot for need to actually promote those kinds of interactions for that to happen. So, okay, let's talk about some other stuff. Some more business-y type stuff. Like I mentioned at the start of this recording, Amazon Game Studios just killed Crucible. Crucible was a finished, albeit not entirely great game that tried to release earlier this year, same story as New World, and went back into essentially a closed development state, similar to New World. The letter that just came out said that after receiving feedback, they decide to kill it. And this isn't the first Amazon Game Studios project we've seen that just disappeared. So what can we infer from this? Amazon is obviously a large company, maybe the world's largest, I don't know. And when they decided to make a game studio and they said they're going to make an MMO and a couple other games, like that's a big deal. So the sense I have with Amazon Game Studios is that they are not willing to make a game, not willing to release a game that they don't think will be an industry leader. They've made some good choices here in that, and that they didn't try to make a World of Warcraft clone. Many, many years of history has shown everyone that you can't beat World of Warcraft at its own game. Just thinking for a moment what I want to say next. But even if the game is not World of Warcraft, it has to be big to meet their standards. They're not going to allow a game to come out, fizzle, have a small audience, and eventually die. They'd rather kill the game than release it in a state that's not killer. We know that they've walked back on a very heavy PvP direction to go more PvE focused. I think the implication is very strong that when we see it again, they will have a lot more to do in PvE. And I think we can also surmise that the PvP aspect will also be further minimized. Because the way it's here today, it's already quite neutered. All the folks who were working on Crucible, I understand, are now going to be working on New World. They've got like 7 or 8 months to hit it hard and show us what this game could look like in 2021. And we need to be careful about getting too excited about it. Alpha testers, beta testers, people who have never played the game before, it's okay to be excited about a game without being attached to it. And that's the way I feel. I would like to enjoy this game and see it do well, but I don't need it to. So good luck, Amazon Game Studios. I don't know how you're going to make enough content to satisfy players with the state of the content in the beta. A year is not a lot of time to make that much content. But hopefully, you can create some systems that encourage fun interactions, that make it so that if the content's not all the way there, people don't notice so much. And they're patient enough to let you get out more content post-release. I think that would be a real win for New World. And I'll see you there. I'll definitely be playing it. But if you've gotten this far in the video, God bless you. This has been quite a ramble. And if people actually like this kind of format of discussion, I might do some more of these on some things that are on my mind. Until then, though, take it easy. And I'll see you in the New World.